In the year 469 BCE, Athens was not yet the dazzling jewel of Greece that it would later become, but the seeds of greatness had already been sown. The city's harbors welcomed ships from distant coasts, carrying goods, stories, and new ideas. Its streets hummed with voices, merchants calling out prices, craftsmen shaping their wares, poets reciting verses, and politicians persuading citizens in the assembly. For the first time in history, an experiment in governance, democracy, was unfolding, granting ordinary men a voice in shaping the destiny of their city. It was into this restless, changing world that Socrates was born. His family was not of noble rank, nor of great fortune. Instead, they belonged to the class of honest workers who sustained Athens through their labor. His father, Sophroniskis, was a stonecutter, a man who spent his days surrounded by blocks of marble and limestone, chiseling and shaping them into columns, statues, and decorative forms. Athens was a city rising out of stone, and Sophroniscus was one of the countless hands giving it physical form. His craft was slow, patient work. A single mistake could shatter a piece and waste weeks of effort. The discipline and steadiness of this labor likely left an impression on the young Socrates, who would later approach ideas in the same careful chiseling way, stripping away falsehoods until only the truth remained. His mother, Phaenarete, was a midwife. She belonged to a profession respected in Athens, for childbirth was always a moment of both hope and danger. With firm hands and an experienced eye, she guided women through their most vulnerable hours. She knew when to speak gently, when to encourage, and when to act decisively. This maternal influence never left Socrates. In later years, he would compare his philosophy to midwifery, just as his mother helped women deliver children. He claimed to help men and women deliver ideas from within themselves. This metaphor, so simple and so profound, became the foundation of his teaching style, the Socratic method. Unlike many Athenian boys of wealth, Socrates was not groomed for politics or given tutors in poetry, music, and rhetoric. His family could not afford such luxuries. He grew up among craftsmen, laborers, and ordinary citizens. His education was shaped more by observation than by formal training. He learned his father's trade, working in the dust of the workshop, the ringing sound of hammer on chisel echoing around him. He learned patience, humility, and the value of shaping raw material into something lasting. Yet even in this modest environment, it was clear that young Socrates was unlike others. From childhood, he possessed a curiosity that seemed endless. He was not content to accept things as they were. He always wanted to know why. Why did some men claim to be wise? Why was justice praised, yet injustice so common? Why did some lives feel honorable and others feel wasted? His questions could be disarming. He did not ask them to irritate others, but because he genuinely wanted to understand. Yet often his questions exposed how little others truly knew about the things they claimed to master. The streets of Athens became his school. In the agora, the bustling public square, Socrates wandered, listening to merchants haggle, poets chant their verses, and politicians make speeches to the people. He was fascinated by the sophists, traveling teachers who sold their knowledge of rhetoric and persuasion for a fee. They dazzled audiences with clever arguments, able to make the weaker case seem stronger. But Socrates, even as a youth, was unsettled by this display. Was knowledge merely the art of persuasion, or was there something deeper, a truth that existed regardless of who argued for it? Physically, Socrates was not remarkable, at least not in a flattering way. Unlike the sculpted beauty celebrated in Greek art, Socrates was short, stout, and far from graceful. His nose was broad, his lips thick, and his eyes bulged slightly, giving him an appearance that contemporaries often compared to the satyrs of Greek comedy. He dressed simply, cared little for wealth, and never sought to impress with outward appearances. Instead, his focus was always inward, toward the life of the mind and the state of the soul. Though his beginnings were humble, Athens itself gave him opportunities. This was a city alive with voices, arguments, and ideas. In the workshops, he learned craftsmanship. In the marketplace, he encountered philosophy. In the military, which he would later serve, he discovered courage and discipline. All of these threads would eventually weave together into the character of the man who would become Athens' most persistent questioner, its gadfly. Looking back, one might say that his childhood already carried the seeds of his destiny. From his father, he inherited the patience to shape rough material into form. From his mother, he inherited the wisdom to guide others through struggle into revelation. And from the city of Athens, he inherited the stage upon which he would live, question, and die. At this stage, however, Socrates was only a boy, the stonecutter's son, wandering the streets of a city on the rise, filled with questions he could not yet answer. He did not yet know that he would one day be remembered, not as a sculptor of stone, but as a sculptor of souls. But already, the first strokes of his life's work had begun. Athens in the 5th century BCE was unlike any city the world had ever seen. Nestled along the Attic coast, its harbors welcomed ships from across the Mediterranean, from Egypt, Persia, and the distant Black Sea. Goods filled its markets: olive oil, wine, pottery, fine fabrics, exotic spices. But Athens was not only a place of trade and material wealth, it was also a city of voices, constantly alive with conversation, debate, and the restless energy of people learning to govern themselves. For young Socrates, this city was a vast classroom. Everywhere he went, there was something to see, to question, and to ponder. The agora, the great marketplace, was the center of life. Merchants cried out prices, craftsmen displayed their goods, and citizens gathered in groups to discuss everything from politics to poetry. The very air was thick with words, persuasive, poetic, sometimes empty, sometimes profound. Socrates listened carefully, his sharp ears catching not only the arguments, but also the contradictions hidden within them. Athens was in the early days of democracy, an experiment in government that gave ordinary citizens a role in shaping laws and policy. For the first time, power was not reserved solely for kings and aristocrats. Instead, men could gather in the assembly, speak their minds, and vote on the future of their city. To many Athenians, this was a source of pride. To others, it was dangerous, giving too much influence to those easily swayed by clever words. Socrates absorbed these tensions from a young age, watching how politics unfolded, not through truth, but through persuasion. The city also breathed art. Athens was home to sculptors and painters, to dramatists whose plays filled the theaters with laughter or tears. Tragedy and comedy were not mere entertainment, but reflections on human life, on justice, fate, and the struggles of men and gods. Socrates, wandering the theaters and listening in the crowds, could not help but notice how drama and philosophy often intertwined. Was the purpose of art simply to delight the senses, or could it also lead men closer to wisdom? Perhaps most influential were the sophists, the traveling teachers who had begun to flock to Athens. They promised to teach the art of rhetoric, the skill of persuasion, and the ability to win arguments for a price. Young men from wealthy families studied under them, eager to prepare for public life in politics and law. To many, the sophists represented progress. They gave ordinary men the tools to rise in a competitive society. But to Socrates, even as a youth, something about them felt hollow. They taught men how to appear wise rather than how to be wise. Their speeches dazzled with cleverness, yet Socrates noticed that when pressed, their knowledge often dissolved into contradictions. It was here, in this city of constant chatter, that Socrates began to develop his earliest habits. He spent hours wandering the streets, speaking with whoever would engage him, craftsmen, merchants, fellow citizens. He would ask them simple questions. What is courage? What is justice? What makes a man good? These questions, deceptively simple, often left his companions puzzled. Many would confidently give an answer at first, only for Socrates to challenge it with further questions until the certainty fell apart. This was not yet the fully formed Socratic method, but its seed was already present. Athens also offered Socrates examples of greatness and folly on the grandest scale. He grew up during the golden age of Pericles, when the city embarked on ambitious building projects and became the cultural center of Greece. The great Parthenon, with its towering columns, rose on the Acropolis, a symbol of Athens' pride and devotion to Athena, its patron goddess. At the same time, Athens was engaged in endless rivalries and wars with other Greek states, especially Sparta. The tension between the pursuit of beauty and the realities of conflict would become a recurring theme in Socrates' reflections. How could a city pursue justice abroad if it did not truly understand justice at home? Though Socrates himself came from modest beginnings, he lived in a city that prized conversation as much as commerce, ideas as much as goods. Here, wealth was not only measured in silver, but also in the sharpness of one's tongue and the persuasiveness of one's argument. To live in Athens was to live in a sea of words, and for Socrates, those words were not to be accepted at face value, but to be tested, broken apart, and re-examined. The city shaped him as much as he questioned it. Without Athens, its democracy, its sophists, its poets, and its constant debates, there could be no Socrates. And without Socrates, Athens would never have learned to question itself. In time, his role in this city of ideas would become clear. He would not build temples like his father, nor guide births like his mother. Instead, he would take his place in the heart of Athens as its most relentless questioner, the gadfly who refused to let it sleep in complacency. But for now, he was still only a youth, listening, learning, and slowly sharpening the tools he would one day use, not against marble, but against the minds of men. As Socrates moved from youth into manhood, Athens itself was entering a turbulent age. The city, proud of its democracy and flourishing under the leadership of Pericles, was locked in a long and bitter struggle with its rival, Sparta. This conflict, the Peloponnesian War, would drag on for decades, testing Athens' power, endurance, and ideals. Like every Athenian citizen of age, Socrates was called to serve. For all his reputation as a philosopher, It is easy to forget that Socrates was also a soldier. He fought not with words, but with armor, shield, and spear. He served in the hoplite army, the citizen soldiers who stood shoulder to shoulder in the phalanx formation, advancing as one impenetrable wall of bronze. For a man known later for his questioning, there was no room for doubt in battle. The discipline of the hoplite demanded courage, strength, and loyalty, qualities that Socrates proved he possessed in abundance. Records from his contemporaries tell us of three major campaigns in which Socrates fought: at Potidaea 432 BCE, Delium 424 BCE, and Amphipolis 422 BCE. In each, his conduct left an impression not only on ordinary soldiers, but on those who would later become his students, including Plato. At Potidaea, Socrates showed extraordinary endurance. The campaign was long and harsh, marked by hunger, fatigue, and bitter cold. While younger men struggled with exhaustion, Socrates marched barefoot over frozen ground, needing little food or rest. His resilience astonished his companions. In the thick of fighting, he is said to have saved the life of Alcibiades, a brilliant but reckless young officer who would later rise to fame in Athenian politics. Socrates carried Alcibiades' wounded body to safety, refusing to abandon him despite the danger. At Delium, the Athenians suffered defeat, and the army was forced into retreat. In the chaos, panic spread, and many soldiers threw away their shields and fled. Socrates, however, remained calm. He retreated in good order, his composure a striking contrast to the fear around him. His steady pace discouraged the enemy from pursuing, for a soldier who retreats without fear is often more dangerous than one who runs. Plato later recalled this moment as a mark of Socrates' courage, not the blind bravery of recklessness, but the deeper courage of discipline and reason. At Amphipolis, another fierce campaign, Socrates once again distinguished himself by his endurance and self-control. He asked for little, complained of nothing, and seemed almost beyond the ordinary needs of the body. His fellow soldiers marveled that he could endure cold, heat, hunger, or fatigue with a serenity that bordered on the superhuman. These experiences on the battlefield revealed a side of Socrates often overlooked: his physical toughness. Though short, stout, and ungainly in appearance, he was no weakling. His body, like his mind, was disciplined. He showed that philosophy was not separate from life's hardships, but was tested and proven in them. Courage, after all, was not an abstract idea to him. It was something lived on the battlefield when fear and death pressed close. But Socrates' service was not only about personal bravery, it also reflected what it meant to be an Athenian citizen. In Athens, military service was both a duty and a privilege. Every citizen was expected to defend the city, not for pay but for honor and responsibility. By fighting in the phalanx, Socrates was not only protecting Athens, but also participating fully in its democratic life. Citizenship was not simply about voting in the assembly, it was about standing in the shield wall shoulder to shoulder with one's fellow Athenians. These years as a soldier left deep marks on Socrates. They gave him credibility in the eyes of his fellow citizens, for he had risked his life as they had. They also gave him lived experience of virtue, of courage, endurance, loyalty, which he would later explore in conversation. When he asked, "What is courage?" he was not speaking as an idle dreamer, but as a man who had faced spears and survived. Athens, however, was changing. The Peloponnesian War dragged on, draining the city's wealth, sapping its strength, and eroding its ideals. Politicians rose and fell, alliances shifted, and the dream of Athens as the shining model of democracy grew dimmer with each year of conflict. Socrates returned from war to a city wounded and uncertain. For him, the battlefield was not only a place of combat, but a mirror of the human soul. Just as soldiers revealed their true character under pressure, so too did citizens reveal their character in times of political turmoil. Athens, he began to see, was full of men who claimed to know what was best for the city, but who lacked the courage and wisdom to truly lead. In the years to come, Socrates would challenge these men with the same fearlessness he had shown in battle. The hoplites' discipline became the philosopher's persistence. The soldier's courage became the questioner's boldness. He had fought for Athens with his body. Soon he would fight for its soul with his words. When Socrates returned from the battlefield, he could have chosen the life expected of an Athenian citizen. He could have pursued wealth through trade, political influence through rhetoric, or honor through public office. Many of his companions did just that. Athens, though battered by war, was still a city of opportunities, and ambitious men sought to rise by aligning themselves with powerful patrons or mastering the art of persuasion. But Socrates was different. He seemed uninterested in chasing wealth or status, while others looked to adorn their homes with fine furniture or dress themselves in costly garments. Socrates walked the streets in a single threadbare cloak, barefoot, indifferent to appearances. Where other men sought power, he sought something else, a deeper kind of understanding, something that could not be measured in gold or applause. This turning away from conventional ambition puzzled many. Athens was a city where success was visible, the orator swaying crowds in the assembly, the general leading soldiers to victory, the merchant returning from sea with riches. Yet Socrates seemed to take pride in his lack of possessions. He ate little, slept simply, and had no concern for luxury. Some thought him eccentric, others thought him mad. But for Socrates, philosophy was not a game of words, it was a way of life. The stories told by his companions suggest that during this period, Socrates began to devote himself entirely to examination of himself, of others, and of the city he lived in. He wandered through the agora, engaging people of all kinds in conversation, craftsmen, politicians, poets, soldiers, even slaves. His questions, simple on the surface, cut to the heart of matters. To a statesman, he might ask, "What is justice?" To a general, "What is courage?" To a poet, "What is beauty?" At first, the answers seemed confident. Politicians, after all, claimed to govern with justice. Generals prided themselves on courage. Poets believed themselves masters of beauty. Yet Socrates' follow-up questions revealed cracks in their certainty. Justice, when examined closely, became difficult to define. Courage, when pressed, became confused with recklessness. Beauty, when probed, dissolved into personal preference. Again and again, those who claimed wisdom found themselves exposed. This relentless questioning earned Socrates admiration among some, irritation among others. To his supporters, he was a man cutting through illusion, helping Athenians recognize their own ignorance so they could pursue truth. To his critics, he was a nuisance, a gadfly, always stinging the city with questions, disturbing its peace. But Socrates himself did not claim wisdom. On the contrary, he insisted that he knew nothing of importance. What set him apart was not possession of truth, but an awareness of ignorance. "The only thing I know," he would later say, "is that I know nothing." For him, recognizing ignorance was not weakness, but the first step toward genuine understanding. Around this time, a story began to circulate that changed the course of his life. The oracle at Delphi, when asked whether anyone was wiser than Socrates, reportedly replied that no man was wiser. Socrates, upon hearing this, was astonished. How could he, a man who admitted his ignorance, be considered the wisest? He resolved to test the oracle's words by questioning those reputed to be wise: politicians, poets, craftsmen. What he found was that while these men believed themselves knowledgeable, their confidence often masked confusion. In contrast, Socrates recognized his lack of knowledge, and in that recognition lay a truer kind of wisdom. This revelation confirmed his mission to act as a midwife of the mind, helping others bring forth understanding by exposing contradictions in their beliefs. Just as his mother had assisted in childbirth, Socrates would assist in the labor of ideas. The goal was not to humiliate or to win arguments, but to guide others toward clarity, though many felt humiliated nonetheless. His pursuit of wisdom was not without cost. He lived in poverty, relying on the generosity of friends and admirers who valued his company. He made enemies among powerful men, whose pride he pierced with his questions. Yet he remained undeterred. For Socrates, philosophy was not an abstract discipline confined to books or classrooms. It was a daily practice, woven into the fabric of life. Every conversation was an opportunity to test, refine, and draw closer to truth. Athens, however, was not always kind to such questioning. The city, still locked in its struggle with Sparta, grew increasingly anxious, unstable, and suspicious of those who challenged its ways. In such an atmosphere, Socrates' refusal to conform, his odd appearance, his indifference to wealth, his habit of undermining the pretensions of the powerful, began to mark him as dangerous. Yet for now, he continued on, undisturbed by wealth or poverty, praise or blame. He had found his calling, not in politics, not in war, not in commerce, but in philosophy, in the search for wisdom, and this search would guide him for the rest of his life, even to his final breath. By the time Socrates reached middle age, his strange way of teaching had already set him apart from other thinkers of Athens. He had no school, no scrolls, no lofty fees to demand from eager students. Instead, he took to the city's streets, its gymnasiums, its bustling marketplace, the agora, where merchants shouted prices, citizens argued politics, and philosophers preached their systems of knowledge. While others stood on platforms and gave speeches, Socrates preferred to wander, to mingle, and above all to ask questions. His method was as unusual as it was unsettling. He never claimed to be wise, never claimed to know anything for certain. Instead, he asked questions so simple they seemed almost naive. What is courage? He would ask a soldier. What is justice? He would ask a politician. What is love? He might inquire of a poet. At first, his companions would answer confidently, offering what seemed to be straightforward truths. But Socrates had a gift for listening closely, for dissecting words with a craftsman's patience, and soon he would gently press further. But if that is so, he would continue, does it not also mean this? And if so, then how can your first answer be correct? What followed was often a slow unraveling. Statements that had once seemed strong and certain dissolved into contradictions. A man who thought himself wise discovered gaps in his knowledge. A young speaker, proud of his eloquence, found himself tangled in confusion. It was not humiliation that Socrates sought, though it sometimes felt that way to those who faced him. Rather, he wanted to strip away the illusions of knowledge, to show that wisdom begins not with having answers, but with realizing how little one truly knows. It was this approach that Socrates famously compared to his mother's craft. Finaretti had been a midwife, guiding women through the pain and labor of childbirth. Socrates declared that he too was a midwife, but of ideas. He claimed he could not himself give birth to knowledge, for he had none to offer. Instead, he helped others give birth to the truths hidden within them. His questions acted like the midwife's hands, coaxing forth something new, something living, something that could only be born through struggle. Many young men of Athens found this method intoxicating. They followed him eagerly, not because he lectured them with long speeches, but because he invited them into a living dialogue. Plato, the young aristocrat who would one day preserve his teacher's memory, was among them. Others included Xenophon, Alcibiades, and countless sons of wealthy Athenians who, despite their privilege, found themselves drawn to the old barefoot philosopher who owned nothing and yet seemed freer than any man in the city. But not all were charmed. To many politicians, poets, and sophists, Socrates was a nuisance. His constant questioning exposed the hollowness of their rhetoric, the weakness of their reasoning, the vanity of their posturing. The sophists, professional teachers who charged high fees for lessons in persuasion, despised him most of all. They offered certainty, formulas for winning arguments, and training for success in politics. Socrates, by contrast, offered only doubt and the uncomfortable realization that those who thought themselves wise often knew nothing at all. As the years passed, the legend of this peculiar philosopher spread throughout Athens. He became a familiar sight, short, stocky, plain-faced, dressed in the simplest of tunics, always barefoot, stopping passers-by to engage them in relentless questioning. Some laughed and admired his wit. Others avoided him, fearing that his questions would trap them in embarrassment. But for those willing to endure the discomfort of his probing inquiries, something extraordinary often emerged, a deeper understanding of themselves, their city, and the world around them. Socrates was not a teacher in the ordinary sense. He had no doctrines to impart, no scrolls to dictate. He was a mirror in which others could see the hollowness of their beliefs and the potential for true wisdom. By guiding others towards self-examination, he laid the foundation for a new kind of philosophy, one not built on grand theories, but on the humble recognition that the first step to wisdom is admitting ignorance. In the bustling heart of Athens, amid temples, theaters, and assemblies, the barefoot son of a stonecutter quietly transformed philosophy into something alive, something practical, something deeply human. He was, in every sense, the midwife of ideas. Athens in Socrates' time was a city of contradictions. It was a place of dazzling intellect, artistic brilliance, and political experimentation. Democracy had begun to flourish, giving citizens the unprecedented power to debate, vote, and influence the city-state's destiny. Yet beneath the surface of this civic pride lurked complacency, corruption, and ignorance. For Socrates, Athens was a sleeping giant, a city that could achieve greatness, but only if it awoke to the truth. It was in this environment that Socrates earned a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his life. He was the gadfly of Athens, like a persistent insect that stings and irritates a slow moving horse. Socrates' questions pricked the conscience of the citizens, refusing to allow them to rest comfortably in their self assured ignorance. No matter the station, nobleman, general, politician, or merchant, none could escape his inquiries. He challenged their assumptions, exposed contradictions, and insisted that true wisdom required honest reflection rather than empty words. Socrates' method, now famously called the Socratic method, was simple yet revolutionary. He would ask a question, follow it with another and another, peeling away layers of certainty until his interlocutor was forced to confront their own lack of understanding. Many found this frustrating. Some became angry. Some avoided him altogether. Yet others were inspired, recognizing in his relentless probing the spark of genuine learning. This approach made him both loved and feared. His friends and followers admired his courage, his honesty, and his devotion to truth, but many in power saw him as dangerous. If citizens began to question authority, tradition, or convention, what would become of Athens? Socrates' influence, though not overtly political, was deeply subversive in its insistence on self-examination. He was not content with abstract discussions alone. Socrates constantly applied his philosophy to the daily lives of Athenians. He spoke about justice in the courts, virtue in the assembly, and the good life in the marketplace. He challenged politicians to act morally rather than for personal gain. He asked young men of privilege to consider the value of wisdom over wealth, and he reminded everyone, rich or poor, powerful or humble, that true strength lay not in physical might or social status, but in the mastery of one's own soul. Socrates' relentless pursuit of truth earned him both admiration and enemies. He was called a corrupter of youth, a critic of the gods, and a troublemaker who threatened the moral foundation of the city. Yet despite these accusations, he never wavered. He walked barefoot through the streets, engaging strangers in dialogue, drinking in the beauty of Athens' architecture, listening to debates in the agora, and challenging anyone who claimed certainty without understanding. Even his physical appearance reflected his philosophy. Short, stocky, with a simple tunic and unkempt hair, Socrates embodied the principle that outward appearances were irrelevant to virtue. What mattered was the mind and the soul. His simplicity and humility, combined with his fearless questioning, made him a living contradiction to the vanity and pretension he so often encountered. In time, the city began to see him not just as a philosopher, but as an essential force, one that would keep Athens honest, questioning, and awake. Though irritating to many, Socrates' persistence ensured that the city could not ignore the uncomfortable truths about itself. He was the gadfly, the tireless stimulator, the irritant that provoked thought, debate, and reflection. By challenging complacency and stirring the minds of his fellow citizens, Socrates became a symbol of intellectual courage. Athens, for all its beauty and power, would never be the same. And yet, as he continued to question, to probe, and to challenge, the seeds of his greatest trial, the one that would define his legacy, were quietly taking root. By the final years of Socrates' life, Athens was a city transformed by war, politics, and shifting values. The Peloponnesian War had left the polis fractured. The streets, once alive with spirited debate, now bore a cautious, tense air. Citizens were weary of instability, and suspicion had begun to cloud the minds of even the most enlightened Athenians. Into this climate of uncertainty, stepped Socrates, the philosopher who asked questions that unsettled the comfortable, revealed the ignorance of the powerful, and challenged the unquestioned beliefs of the many. Socrates' presence in the public sphere, once a source of fascination and admiration, had begun to stir resentment. His method, the relentless pursuit of truth through dialogue, pricked the egos of politicians, generals, and prominent citizens. Some who had once tolerated or even respected him now whispered that his probing questions were dangerous. Was it wisdom that Socrates pursued, or subversion? The line between the two had begun to blur in the minds of a society already frayed by political tension. In 399 BCE, the simmering tensions reached a boiling point. Socrates was formally charged with two offenses: impiety, or failure to recognize the gods of Athens, and corruption of the youth, leading them to question authority and tradition. The charges, though cloaked in legal language, reflected a deeper fear, the fear that Athens' moral and social foundations were being challenged by a man who refused to conform. Socrates' trial was not merely a legal proceeding, it was a confrontation between two worldviews. On one side stood a city anxious to preserve its customs, fearing the influence of philosophical inquiry on impressionable youth. On the other stood Socrates, calm and resolute, embodying a life dedicated to reason, virtue, and the pursuit of truth. He did not approach the court with fear or compromise, nor did he plead for leniency through flattery or manipulation. To do so, he believed, would betray the very principles that had guided his life. During the trial, Socrates spoke with clarity and unwavering moral courage. He reminded the jury that the unexamined life is not worth living, challenging them to consider what it truly meant to live with virtue and wisdom. He recounted the influence of the Oracle of Delphi, who declared him the wisest of men, not because of any particular knowledge, but because he alone acknowledged his own ignorance. He criticized those who held positions of power without understanding, and he warned that moral and intellectual complacency could lead Athens into decay. Yet Socrates' honesty, his refusal to flatter or yield, provoked anger as much as it did admiration. The jury, influenced by fear, resentment, and a city weary of conflict, found him guilty. His calm defiance, his insistence on truth over popularity, was perceived as arrogance by those who preferred comfort to confrontation. The punishment, death by hemlock, was pronounced. The city that had once nurtured his curiosity and intellect now demanded the silencing of its most provocative thinker. Even in the shadow of his sentence, Socrates remained unshaken. In prison, he continued his discussions with followers like Plato and Crito, emphasizing the importance of virtue, the immortality of the soul, and the pursuit of wisdom above life itself. He offered counsel to those around him, turning his final days into a lesson in courage, moral integrity, and philosophical reflection. The trial of Socrates exposed a deep tension within Athens between freedom of thought and social conformity, between the relentless pursuit of truth and the comfort of unquestioned tradition. It revealed how fear, envy, and misunderstanding could distort justice, even in a city that prided itself on democracy. Yet Socrates' response to these pressures, his calm acceptance, his unwavering commitment to principle, would transform his personal tragedy into a universal lesson. Though the verdict cast a shadow over the city, it also illuminated a path for generations to come. Socrates' life, trial, and steadfast adherence to his principles became a beacon of philosophical courage. The shadows of trial, rather than ending his influence, laid the foundation for his enduring legacy, inspiring thinkers, teachers, and seekers of truth throughout history. In the quiet of the prison, in the public glare of the court, Socrates demonstrated that the measure of a life is not in its length, but in its fidelity to wisdom and virtue. The prison walls of Athens, cold and unyielding, became the setting for the final act of Socrates' extraordinary life. His cell was modest, almost bare, yet within it unfolded conversations of profound depth, conversations that would echo through centuries. Here, in confinement, Socrates remained unshaken, embodying the principles he had championed throughout his life: the pursuit of truth, the cultivation of virtue, and the steadfast commitment to wisdom above all else. Crito, his loyal friend, visited him with urgency and worry. The heavy weight of the impending sentence hung over them like a storm. Socrates, Crito implored, you must escape. Your life is at stake. Think of your children, your friends, your followers. Do not surrender to this injustice. Socrates listened calmly, his demeanor serene. He responded, not with fear or anger, but with reasoned dialogue. He reminded Crito that one must never commit injustice, even in the face of suffering. To escape would be to violate the laws and principles he had respected all his life, and in doing so, he would betray the very virtues he had spent decades teaching. One must never do wrong willingly, he said, and that includes doing wrong to oneself or to the state. Throughout these final hours, Socrates spoke of the soul, its immortality, and the duty of the philosopher to cultivate moral excellence. He reassured his friends that death was not to be feared, for it was either a peaceful slumber or a passage to a better place, where the soul could meet those who had lived with virtue and wisdom. In his calm acceptance, he transformed the inevitability of death into a profound lesson in courage and philosophical reflection. The other disciples gathered around him, listening intently as he imparted his final teachings. He discussed justice, the nature of the good life, and the importance of reason in guiding action. His words were not of despair, but of hope, urging his followers to continue seeking truth and virtue, even in a world full of uncertainty and moral challenge. When the time came to drink the hemlock, Socrates accepted the cup with composure. He spoke to each of his friends, offering reassurance and gratitude. His demeanor was calm, almost serene, as he felt the slow chill of the poison course through his body. He walked with dignity to the appointed place, conversing with those around him until his final moments. Even in the face of death, Socrates' mind remained active and clear. He instructed his friends to care for one another, to honor the pursuit of virtue above all else, and to carry forward the spirit of inquiry that had defined his life. His final words, though simple, conveyed a lifetime of philosophical conviction. The soul's integrity and the pursuit of goodness were more important than life itself. As his strength waned, Socrates lay back, embracing the inevitable with courage and calm. One by one, his friends witnessed the serene closure of a life dedicated to wisdom. The city of Athens, which had once condemned him, now faced the enduring truth of his legacy. Socrates' death was not an end but a beginning, a transformation of a mortal life into immortal philosophy. In the days and years that followed, Socrates' teachings spread across the Greek world, carried by Plato and other devoted students. His dialogues, his method of questioning, and his unwavering moral courage became the foundation of Western philosophy. The final dialogue, spoken in a quiet Athenian cell, became a testament to the power of integrity, reason, and the fearless pursuit of truth. Socrates' life ended in the shadows of a prison, yet it illuminated the world with the light of wisdom. Through his calm acceptance, his reasoned discourse, and his fearless embrace of mortality, he left a legacy that transcended time, teaching generations to live examined lives, to question boldly, and to value virtue above all else. The last dialogue was more than a farewell. It was a timeless lesson in courage, conscience, and the enduring power of the human mind. Socrates' death in the cold, silent prison of Athens marked the end of a life lived in unyielding pursuit of truth. Yet paradoxically, it signaled the beginning of an extraordinary intellectual legacy. While the Athenians sought to silence him, the ideas he had nurtured continued to grow, carried forward by devoted students and thinkers who recognized that the man's life had been a vessel for something far greater than himself. In the aftermath of his execution, the city's streets, once echoing with his probing questions, became a sacred ground for the birth of philosophical thought that would resonate for millennia. At the heart of this legacy was Plato, Socrates' most famous disciple. Plato, deeply moved by the moral courage and intellectual rigor of his teacher, devoted his life to preserving Socratic teachings. Through a series of dialogues, he captured not only Socrates' words, but also the very spirit of his method, the relentless questioning, the pursuit of virtue, and the insistence on examining one's life. In these dialogues, Socrates emerged as both a guide and a mirror, reflecting the moral and intellectual struggles of Athens, while challenging readers to confront their own assumptions. Through Plato's writings, Socratic thought was transformed from ephemeral conversations in the marketplace into a permanent record of human inquiry, a treasure trove for future generations. Socrates' influence extended far beyond Plato. His insistence on questioning and dialogue shaped the thinking of countless students and philosophers, including Aristotle, who, though developing his own distinct approach, was profoundly impacted by the foundational principles Socrates had instilled. Across Greece, young minds flocked to the study of philosophy, eager to engage in debates about ethics, justice, and the nature of knowledge. Socratic principles, curiosity, critical thinking, and the search for moral clarity became the cornerstones of education and civic life. Philosophy evolved from private speculation into a disciplined practice that informed governance, rhetoric, and cultural life, guiding citizens in their personal and political decisions. Despite the turbulence and political strife of Athens, Socrates' teachings endured. His trial and execution had revealed the fragility of public opinion and the perils of challenging entrenched power, yet they also underscored the enduring power of moral conviction. Socrates demonstrated that integrity, reason, and the pursuit of virtue were worth more than wealth, comfort, or popularity. His life and death became emblematic of the courage to uphold truth in the face of adversity, a lesson that resonated not only with his immediate followers, but also with countless generations thereafter. The academy established by Plato served as a beacon for this growing philosophical movement. It became a place where ideas could be debated freely, where students could refine their reasoning, and where the spirit of Socratic inquiry could flourish. Socrates' method of asking questions, probing assumptions, and challenging superficial knowledge became the cornerstone of education, encouraging rigorous thought and ethical reflection. This approach influenced not only philosophy, but also science, politics, and literature, laying the groundwork for rational inquiry in Western civilization. Over centuries, Socrates' legacy transcended geography and culture. Thinkers across the Mediterranean, from Athens to Alexandria, and later throughout Europe, found inspiration in his courage and intellectual discipline. His insistence on questioning, examining life, and seeking moral truth became a guiding principle for philosophers, educators, and leaders. Socrates became more than a historical figure. He became a symbol of human potential, a representation of the capacity for reasoned thought, and a moral compass pointing toward integrity and wisdom. The impact of Socratic thought continued to ripple across time. Renaissance humanists, Enlightenment philosophers, and modern thinkers all drew upon the lessons of Socrates. His call to examine life, to question assumptions, and to seek truth informed debates on justice, ethics, and governance, shaping the evolution of Western civilization. Socrates' life demonstrated that ideas, when grounded in virtue and reason, could outlast empires, survive persecution, and inspire humanity across centuries. Even today, Socrates' voice continues to speak through the ages. In classrooms, lecture halls, and public debates, the Socratic method challenges students and thinkers to question deeply, reason carefully, and live ethically. His insistence that an unexamined life is not worth living continues to resonate, reminding each generation that wisdom is not merely a body of knowledge, but a way of living, an active engagement with the world, a relentless pursuit of truth, and a moral courage to stand by one's principles. Socrates' legacy is not merely philosophical, it is profoundly human. It teaches that one individual, through integrity, curiosity, and courage, can inspire change far beyond the limits of their own life. Though his body returned to the earth of Athens, the ideas he championed soared across time, illuminating the minds of generations, challenging the comfortable and compelling humanity to think, to question, and to strive for a life of virtue and wisdom. In this way, Socrates became immortal, not through monuments or wealth, but through the enduring power of ideas, the timeless resonance of inquiry, and the unquenchable flame of human reason. Socrates did not pursue wisdom in isolation, though he often walked alone through the streets of Athens, questioning passers-by and probing the city's deepest ideas. He was never truly solitary. His life was surrounded by friends, students, and admirers who recognized in him a unique blend of intellect, moral courage, and an unwavering commitment to truth. These companions became witnesses to his life, chroniclers of his ideas, and ultimately the torchbearers of a legacy that would transcend time. Among his closest followers was Plato, whose admiration for Socrates extended far beyond the simple teacher-student relationship. Plato observed the intensity of Socrates' questioning, the precision of his reasoning, and the moral courage with which he faced the forces of Athens. Plato became both a student and a disciple, absorbing not only the lessons of logic and philosophy, but also the method by which Socrates encouraged others to think critically. Through Plato, Socratic dialogues would be recorded, preserving the voice of a man whose words might otherwise have vanished with his death. Another devoted follower was Xenophon, a historian and soldier who approached Socrates with a practical curiosity. Xenophon chronicled Socrates' teachings with attention to both philosophy and daily life, highlighting his concern for ethical conduct, justice, and civic responsibility. Through Xenophon's writings, the humanity of Socrates, his humor, humility, and compassion came alive, allowing later generations to glimpse not only a philosopher, but also a deeply caring human being committed to guiding others toward virtue. Socrates' circle was not limited to famous students. It included ordinary Athenians, craftsmen, merchants, and young men from all walks of life who were drawn to his presence by the clarity of his thought and the depth of his questions. These followers were challenged to examine their lives, to question their assumptions, and to consider what it truly meant to live a good and just life. Socrates' influence extended beyond formal instruction. It was lived experience, a way of being that transformed the everyday into a constant pursuit of wisdom. The relationships Socrates cultivated were founded on dialogue rather than authority. He did not preach or impose his beliefs. Instead, he asked questions, listened carefully, and guided others to uncover their own understanding. This method, later known as the Socratic method, empowered his students to think independently, to challenge received wisdom, and to engage actively in the pursuit of virtue. In this way, Socrates' followers became partners in discovery, co-creators of insight, rather than passive recipients of knowledge. The loyalty and devotion of Socrates' friends were tested in the most extreme circumstances. When he was imprisoned and faced the death penalty, it was these students and companions who remained close, witnessing his composure, courage, and unwavering commitment to principle. They observed him choosing truth over expedience, integrity over survival, and reason over fear. These moments became foundational stories for those who would carry Socratic thought forward, demonstrating that philosophy was not merely abstract discussion, but a guide to living a principled and courageous life. Through Plato, Xenophon, and other disciples, the teachings of Socrates spread far beyond Athens. These followers founded schools, wrote dialogues, and became influential thinkers in their own right, ensuring that the questions Socrates asked and the lessons he imparted would continue to inspire generations. Socrates' influence reached into politics, ethics, education, and literature, shaping Western thought in profound and lasting ways. The friendships he nurtured also revealed another side of Socrates, his warmth, wit, and humanity. He laughed, shared meals, and engaged in spirited debates with his companions, demonstrating that the pursuit of wisdom was intertwined with the bonds of human connection. His relationships were a living example of the principle he championed, that a good life is not only thoughtful and examined, but also deeply connected to the lives of others. Socrates' circle of followers illustrates that ideas endure through relationships, through the people who carry them forward. The lessons learned under his guidance became seeds planted in minds that would grow into philosophies, schools, and traditions spanning centuries. His friends and disciples did more than honor his memory. They amplified his voice, expanded his reach, and ensured that the pursuit of wisdom he championed would remain a guiding light for humanity. In the end, Socrates' life was defined as much by the people he influenced as by the ideas he explored. Through friendships forged in dialogue, loyalty tested by adversity, and teaching rooted in inquiry, he transformed not only individual minds, but also the intellectual and moral landscape of Athens and the wider world. His followers became the living vessels of his philosophy, proving that the power of ideas, when nurtured in the hearts and minds of others, can outlast even the trials of mortality. As Socrates advanced in age, the city of Athens around him was changing. Once a vibrant hub of intellectual discourse and democratic ideals, Athens had endured war, political upheaval, and a fragile restoration of democracy. These turbulent times created tension between tradition and reform, authority and freedom, as citizens struggled to rebuild their city while confronting the consequences of past conflicts. Amidst this chaos, Socrates remains steadfast in his pursuit of truth, questioning assumptions and probing the moral compass of his fellow Athenians. Socrates' method of relentless questioning, which had once inspired admiration, began to attract suspicion. His willingness to challenge the powerful, to ask uncomfortable questions, and to examine accepted norms made him a figure of unease for many. In the marketplaces and assembly halls, whispers grew about a man who claimed to know nothing yet spoke with authority. Some began to view his teachings as subversive, fearing that his influence over young minds could destabilize the fragile social order. In 399 BCE, these suspicions reached a climax. Socrates was formally accused of impiety, failing to respect the city's gods, and corrupting the youth of Athens. The charges were both political and personal, reflecting the anxieties of a city still recovering from the excesses of war and tyranny. For Socrates, the trial was not merely a legal matter, it was a profound moral test, one that challenged the very principles he had lived by for decades. During the trial, Socrates stood with remarkable composure. He did not plead for mercy or attempt to charm the jury with rhetoric designed to save his life. Instead, he confronted the accusations directly, dissecting each argument with calm logic and unwavering honesty. He explained that his so-called corruption was nothing more than the encouragement of critical thinking, guiding young Athenians to question assumptions, seek virtue, and examine their own lives. To Socrates, moral integrity was far more important than survival, and the pursuit of truth could not be compromised for personal safety. The trial also revealed the tension between philosophy and politics. Socrates challenged the jury to reflect not only on his actions, but on the moral and civic responsibilities of all Athenians. He questioned whether conformity to societal norms truly equated to justice, and whether fear of offending the powerful should govern one's behavior. His arguments were both daring and provocative, highlighting the ethical dilemmas inherent in civic life and the cost of unwavering commitment to principle. Despite his reasoned defense, the jury found him guilty. Sentencing followed, and Socrates faced the choice between exile and death. True to his philosophy, he refused to compromise. Exile, he argued, would be a betrayal of his principles and his duty to the city he loved. To abandon Athens and the life of inquiry he had cultivated would be to forsake the very purpose that had guided him for decades. Socrates chose to face death with courage, demonstrating the consistency of his moral philosophy, even in the face of the ultimate consequence. In the days leading to his execution, Socrates remained surrounded by loyal friends and followers. They implored him to flee, to save his life, and yet he calmly declined. Instead, he spoke of the immortality of the soul, the value of living a virtuous life, and the responsibility each person bears to act according to conscience rather than fear. These final teachings underscored the enduring nature of his philosophy, that truth and virtue are worth more than life itself, and that integrity cannot be measured merely by survival or popularity. The methodical administration of his death, drinking the poison hemlock, was marked by serenity. Socrates spoke with his usual clarity, addressing those around him with kindness, instruction, and even gentle humor. In his final moments, he embodied the principles he had championed throughout his life: courage in the face of adversity, unwavering commitment to truth, and profound respect for the moral and intellectual growth of others. Socrates' trial and execution left Athens in shock and reflection. His death became a catalyst for philosophical thought, inspiring debates about justice, ethics, and the responsibilities of both individuals and the state. Through Plato, Xenophon, and countless others, the story of his trial became immortal, a timeless lesson on the cost of wisdom and the power of principled living. In retrospect, Socrates' trials and tribulations illustrate the tension between ideals and reality, between moral courage and societal pressure. They remind us that the pursuit of truth is often fraught with danger, that integrity can challenge power, and that the path of virtue may demand sacrifices unimaginable to those who do not walk it. Socrates' life, culminating in this profound trial, stands as a testament to the enduring power of thought, conscience, and the human spirit. The days leading up to Socrates' death were heavy with both sorrow and reflection. Yet for Socrates himself, they were filled with clarity and purpose. Athens, a city renowned for its vibrancy and intellectual fervor, now seemed subdued in the shadow of his trial. His friends and disciples crowded his modest cell, their eyes filled with fear, grief, and desperation. They whispered urgently, imploring him to escape, to seek exile, or to find some loophole in the sentence that would save his life. Some even plotted to bribe officials, believing that the city's love for Socrates could overcome the legal decree. Socrates, however, received these pleas with calm patience. He listened carefully, responding not with anger or fear, but with reasoned explanation. To evade his sentence would betray the very principles he had dedicated his life to defending. One must never do wrong, even in return for wrong done to oneself, he reminded them, his voice steady. To abandon justice for personal safety is to abandon the soul's health, and that is far worse than death. In the quiet of his cell, Socrates continued to teach. He spoke of the immortality of the soul, describing death not as an end but as a transition, a release from the body into a state where the soul could pursue truth unencumbered by earthly distractions. He encouraged his friends to seek virtue above wealth, wisdom above fame, and moral courage above the comfort of life itself. These were not abstract lectures, but urgent guidance for those who loved him, a final testament of his philosophy in action. As the appointed hour approached, Socrates' composure never wavered. He engaged in gentle conversation with those gathered around him, sharing memories, recalling past debates, and even using humor to ease their sorrow. When one disciple wept openly, Socrates offered a serene smile. "Weep not for me, for the wise man fears neither life nor death. The soul moves on, and I shall continue in that pursuit which I have always valued most." When the moment to drink the hemlock arrived, Socrates did so without hesitation, displaying a courage that astonished even his most devoted followers. He instructed his companions to maintain order, to support one another, and to remain steadfast in virtue. As the poison spread through his body, he continued to speak, explaining, clarifying, and comforting, embodying the very lessons he had imparted for decades. His calm acceptance of death was not resignation, but the ultimate expression of his philosophy, the pursuit of moral integrity, and the cultivation of wisdom above all earthly concerns. The city of Athens was left to grapple with the consequences of his death. Citizens debated the justice of his execution, while philosophers pondered the legacy of a man who had dared to challenge assumptions, question authority and demand accountability from the human soul. Plato and Xenophon, his devoted students, recorded these final hours in vivid detail, ensuring that the spirit of Socrates' teaching would survive long beyond the confines of his mortal life. Socrates' influence did not end with his passing. His dialogues and methods laid the foundation for centuries of philosophical inquiry, inspiring Plato, Aristotle, and countless others. His courage in facing death became a model of integrity, a testament that true wisdom and virtue are more valuable than life itself. Socrates' final moments stand as a timeless reminder that a life guided by reason, virtue, and a relentless quest for truth is a life of profound significance. Even in death, Socrates taught. His calm demeanor, unwavering principles, and unflinching commitment to justice exemplified the philosophy he had lived. The lessons of those final hours resonate through the centuries, that the pursuit of wisdom requires courage, that virtue demands sacrifice, and that the measure of a life is not in years or wealth, but in the depth of thought, the strength of character, and the steadfast devotion to truth. Thus, Socrates' final moments were not simply the end of a life, but the culmination of a journey, a luminous example of what it means to live rightly, think deeply, and face the inevitable with dignity. The city mourned, but the world gained an enduring legacy, a reminder that true philosophy is lived, not merely spoken, and that the soul's quest for truth transcends even death itself. Socrates' death did not mark the end of his influence. Rather, it became the beginning of a philosophical legacy that would echo through the ages. The city of Athens, though shaken by the loss of its most provocative thinker, could not erase the ideas he had sown in the minds of its citizens. His unwavering commitment to questioning, to moral integrity, and to the pursuit of wisdom left an indelible mark on those who had known him and on generations yet unborn. Among his closest followers, Plato emerged as the most devoted chronicler of Socrates' life and teachings. Through dialogues such as Apology, Credo, and Phaedo, Plato immortalized Socrates' philosophy, his method of inquiry, and his moral courage. In these works, Socrates is not merely a historical figure, but a living voice, questioning assumptions, probing the conscience, and illuminating the path of reason. The Socratic method, relentless questioning to reveal truth and expose contradictions, became a cornerstone of critical thinking, shaping education and philosophy for centuries to come. Socrates' influence extended beyond Plato. Aristotle, though a student of Plato rather than Socrates directly, inherited the spirit of inquiry that Socrates had ignited. The insistence on examining life, seeking virtue, and valuing reason over blind obedience became a foundation of Western philosophy. Socrates' insistence that the unexamined life is not worth living challenged humans to scrutinize their beliefs, confront their assumptions, and strive for moral clarity, a challenge that resonates even in modern society. The cultural and political impact of Socrates' life was equally profound. Athens, a city that had executed him, slowly recognized the brilliance of his moral vision. Citizens debated the justice of his trial, the courage of his convictions, and the lessons embedded in his refusal to compromise his principles. His death became a symbol of intellectual courage and the price of questioning authority, inspiring later thinkers, reformers, and revolutionaries who sought truth over convenience, justice over self-interest. Over time, Socrates' legacy transcended the boundaries of philosophy. His life inspired art, literature, and politics, from the writings of Cicero in Rome to the ethical inquiries of Renaissance thinkers. Philosophers across the world drew upon his method of dialectic questioning to examine social norms, ethics, and the nature of knowledge itself. His insistence that virtue is knowledge, that ethical living requires understanding, and that courage is inseparable from wisdom formed the ethical backbone of countless philosophical traditions. The lessons of Socrates also endured in education. Schools of thought across centuries adopted his method of dialogue and inquiry, emphasizing the importance of asking questions rather than simply memorizing answers. From the Academy of Plato to modern classrooms around the world, teachers invoke Socrates' example to encourage critical thinking, self-reflection, and the pursuit of intellectual honesty. Socrates' life also reminds humanity of the fragility of freedom and the dangers of conformity. His execution, a result of political fear and social misunderstanding, serves as a cautionary tale of the cost of truth in a society resistant to self-examination. Yet, it also illustrates the power of individual moral courage. A single life lived with integrity and reason can influence countless others and outlast the transient authority of any government. Even today, more than 2 millennia after his death, Socrates' questions remain alive. Who are we? What is justice? How should one live? How do we distinguish right from wrong? These inquiries, once posed in the crowded streets of Athens, continue to challenge minds worldwide. The Socratic principle that understanding oneself and living virtuously are the highest aims of life remains a guiding light for scholars, leaders, and ordinary individuals seeking meaning in a complex world. In the end, Socrates' legacy is not merely a record of a man who asked questions, but a testament to the enduring power of wisdom, courage, and virtue. His life demonstrates that true influence is measured not in material wealth, titles, or power, but in the capacity to awaken thought, challenge complacency, and inspire humanity toward a higher standard of ethical and intellectual living. Thus, Socrates' voice still resonates across centuries, a reminder that the pursuit of truth is timeless, the cultivation of the soul is eternal, and that even in the face of death, the commitment to wisdom can illuminate the world forever. His legacy, carried by Plato, Aristotle, and countless thinkers since, stands as a beacon. The examined life is the life most worth living. While Socrates spent his life in the bustling city of Athens, his philosophical reach eventually extended far beyond the walls of the city he called home. Though he himself never traveled extensively, the ideas he inspired traveled across time and space, shaping the intellectual landscape of ancient Greece and later the entire Western world. His method of questioning, his moral rigor, and his insistence on examining life resonated with thinkers, rulers, and ordinary citizens alike. Among his immediate circle, Socrates' students were the first to carry his teachings beyond Athens. Plato, in particular, became the torchbearer of Socratic thought. Through the establishment of the Academy, Plato created a space where the dialectical method, the practice of continuous questioning and dialogue, could flourish. Here, young minds from various regions of Greece came to grapple with questions of justice, virtue, and knowledge. Socrates' influence, therefore, spread not through conquest or politics, but through education, conversation, and intellectual mentorship. Aristotle, a student of Plato, further extended Socratic philosophy by systematizing inquiry and exploring fields ranging from ethics to natural sciences. Socrates' insistence on the examined life became foundational in Aristotle's ethical theories, emphasizing that moral virtue arises from understanding and conscious choice. Through these intellectual lineages, Socrates' ideas began to penetrate regions far beyond Athens, shaping thought in cities such as Macedon, Alexandria, and Rome. Even outside the realm of philosophy, Socrates' impact was felt in literature, politics, and law. Writers and playwrights drew upon his example of integrity and courage, portraying characters who questioned authority and pursued truth against the pressures of society. Political leaders who valued wisdom and moral reflection found in Socratic dialogue a model for thoughtful governance, recognizing that the pursuit of justice requires the courage to confront entrenched beliefs and challenge societal norms. Moreover, Socrates' life inspired a tradition of questioning that transcended cultural boundaries. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, European thinkers such as Erasmus and Montaigne studied his dialogues and admired his method of inquiry, applying it to ethics, religion, and humanism. Enlightenment philosophers, including Voltaire and Kant, also drew inspiration from Socrates' unwavering commitment to reason and moral integrity, seeing in his life a prototype of intellectual courage and the pursuit of universal truth. Socrates' influence even extends into modern times. Today, educators continue to employ the Socratic method in classrooms around the world, encouraging students to engage critically with ideas, think independently, and articulate reasoned arguments. Legal systems adopt his dialectical techniques to ensure fairness and thorough examination of evidence. In literature, art, and culture, Socratic themes, courage, self-examination, and ethical inquiry remain ever present, inspiring people to question their beliefs and strive for a deeper understanding of the world. Socrates demonstrated that true influence is not measured by material wealth, military conquests, or political power. Instead, it lies in the ability to inspire thought, provoke reflection, and awaken moral consciousness. Through his teachings, he showed that the pursuit of knowledge and virtue could transcend time, shaping civilizations far beyond the city in which he lived and died. In the end, Socrates' legacy beyond Athens reminds humanity that ideas, when powerful and enduring, can travel further than armies, outlast empires, and continue to illuminate minds centuries after their origin. The questions he posed about justice, virtue, and the examined life still resonate today, proving that wisdom, once sown, knows no boundaries. Though Socrates lived over 2 millennia ago, his influence continues to echo in countless aspects of the modern world, from classrooms and boardrooms to social movements and online discourse. His relentless pursuit of truth, ethical reflection, and method of questioning has shaped the way humanity approaches knowledge, morality, and personal growth. Socrates' philosophy, centered on the examined life, remains strikingly relevant, even in a rapidly evolving society dominated by technology, instant communication, and global interconnectedness. One of the most direct ways Socratic thinking persists today is in education. Traditional teaching often focuses on memorization of facts, but modern educators increasingly embrace the Socratic method, a style of teaching rooted in dialogue, critical questioning, and reflective thinking. In classrooms across the globe, Students are encouraged not only to absorb information, but to challenge it, ask probing questions, and defend their reasoning. This approach fosters independent thinking, intellectual courage, and a deep understanding of complex subjects. In law schools, students participate in Socratic dialogues, where professors question them about legal principles, prompting them to analyze, justify, and reconsider their assumptions. In philosophy and ethics classes, Socratic questioning helps students confront difficult moral dilemmas, examine their own beliefs, and understand diverse perspectives. Beyond formal education, the method also inspires lifelong learning, encouraging individuals to critically evaluate news, research, and opinions in an age of information overload. Socrates' influence extends far beyond classrooms. In politics, business, and social leadership, his principles of questioning, reflection, and moral responsibility remain invaluable. Ethical leadership often involves questioning existing policies, challenging norms, and making decisions that prioritize justice and the greater good. Leaders who adopt a Socratic mindset cultivate transparency, accountability, and open dialogue, creating environments where informed debate and thoughtful decision making flourish. Social movements also reflect Socratic ideals. Activists and reformers around the world challenge assumptions, question established practices, and demand moral reflection from communities and governments. Movements advocating for human rights, environmental sustainability, and social justice echoes Socrates' insistence on examining one's actions and their consequences. His enduring lesson that living unexamined is a life wasted motivates individuals to act ethically and thoughtfully in pursuit of a fairer society. In the intellectual realm, Socratic influence remains profound. Modern philosophy draws directly from his methods, exploring questions of truth, knowledge, consciousness, and morality. Literary works continue to feature characters who embody Socratic traits, individuals who question authority, confront societal norms, and engage in reflective dialogue. Such stories invite readers to examine their own lives, challenge assumptions, and seek understanding. Even psychology has adopted Socratic principles. Therapists often employ techniques derived from Socratic questioning to guide clients towards self-awareness, critical thinking, and personal growth. By prompting individuals to reflect on their beliefs, challenge cognitive distortions, and consider alternative perspectives, this approach fosters ethical reasoning, emotional intelligence, and constructive problem solving. Surprisingly, Socratic ideas have found a place in the modern digital age. Online forums, discussion groups, and intellectual communities echo the ancient marketplaces of Athens, encouraging debate, dialogue, and reflective inquiry. While social media often promotes rapid opinions and superficial engagement, it can also provide a platform for Socratic dialogue, where questioning, critical thinking, and evidence-based reasoning help people navigate complex issues and combat misinformation. Podcasts, online courses, and virtual classrooms further exemplify the modern adoption of Socratic principles. Educators and thinkers engage global audiences in reflective discussions, prompting listeners to reconsider assumptions, explore ethical dilemmas, and cultivate wisdom. Technology, rather than replacing Socratic inquiry, can amplify it, making dialogue, reflection, and philosophical exploration accessible to anyone with curiosity and an internet connection. At the heart of Socratic philosophy lies a timeless principle, the examined life. Socrates believed that true wisdom comes not from wealth, power, or social status, but from questioning oneself, reflecting on one's values, and striving for moral integrity. In the modern world, this principle resonates as much as ever. Individuals face complex ethical decisions daily, from personal choices about consumption and lifestyle to professional decisions affecting communities and the environment. By reflecting on these decisions, asking difficult questions, and striving for ethical consistency, people continue the Socratic journey of self-discovery and moral responsibility. Socrates' relevance today lies not merely in his historical presence, but in the universal applicability of his ideas. Across cultures, disciplines, and generations, his insistence on questioning, dialogue, and self-reflection encourages people to think deeply, act ethically, and embrace lifelong learning. His legacy reminds humanity that wisdom is not a destination, but a continuous pursuit, a journey defined by curiosity, courage, and moral vigilance. Whether through education, leadership, philosophy, or personal introspection, Socratic principles shape the modern world. His teachings invite people to pause, reflect, and consider not only what they know, but how they live. In a society marked by complexity, rapid change, and competing perspectives, Socratic thinking provides a compass for navigating uncertainty and striving toward a more thoughtful, ethical, and meaningful life. Socrates, though long gone, continues to challenge us to question boldly, think critically, and live purposefully. His call to examine life resonates across centuries, reminding humanity that the pursuit of wisdom, the courage to question, and the dedication to virtue remain as vital today as they were in ancient Athens. The trial of Socrates stands as one of the most remarkable and enduring episodes in the history of philosophy, a moment where ideas clashed with power and truth confronted societal convention. Accused of corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety against the gods, Socrates faced the city's legal system with the same unwavering commitment to reason and principle that had defined his life. Unlike many who would have pleaded for mercy or appealed to popularity, he remained steadfast, asserting that he sought only to guide people toward wisdom and self-examination. His defense was not a mere legal argument, but a profound philosophical statement, a declaration that virtue, knowledge, and the pursuit of truth outweigh fear, reputation, and even life itself. Socrates' composure, clarity, and courage in the face of condemnation left an indelible mark on those who witnessed it, inspiring admiration, reflection, and debate that continues to this day. Throughout the trial, Socrates' insistence on questioning, dialogue, and ethical reasoning contrasted sharply with the political and social norms of Athens. The city, recovering from political upheavals and wary of dissent, saw his influence as dangerous, even subversive. Yet Socrates refused to compromise his principles, emphasizing that he had devoted his life to the improvement of others through the pursuit of knowledge. He challenged the court and the citizens to reflect on justice, virtue, and the purpose of human existence, demonstrating that moral courage and philosophical inquiry were more valuable than acquiescence or convenience. His words, recorded by his disciple Plato, reveal a man unafraid of death, convinced that a life without examination and reflection was not worth living. In this sense, the trial itself became a living illustration of his philosophy, a confrontation between the examined life and societal complacency, between ethical integrity and expedience. Ultimately, Socrates was sentenced to death by consuming a cup of hemlock, an event that epitomized the tension between individual conscience and communal authority. Even in facing mortality, he remained composed, continuing to engage in dialogue with friends and followers about the nature of the soul, virtue, and the afterlife. He spoke not with fear, but with curiosity and clarity, suggesting that death might not be an end, but a transition, a liberation of the soul to a realm of understanding and truth. His final moments emphasized the philosophical values he had championed throughout his life: courage, reason, and the pursuit of knowledge over fear and desire for personal preservation. The image of Socrates calmly accepting his fate while encouraging others to live ethically and thoughtfully resonates as a timeless testament to the power of principle over self-interest. Socrates' death, far from silencing his ideas, amplified them. His followers, particularly Plato, preserved his teachings and disseminated them across generations, ensuring that his philosophy endured beyond the streets of Athens. The dialogues and writings, inspired by Socrates, explored questions of justice, knowledge, ethics, and the ideal society, laying the foundation for Western philosophy. His approach, emphasizing inquiry over dogma and dialogue over decree, influenced thinkers from Aristotle to modern philosophers, shaping how humanity conceptualizes morality, truth, and intellectual freedom. The narrative of his trial and execution also serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers societies face when conformity, fear, or ignorance suppress critical thought and moral reflection. The legacy of Socrates' final act extends into education, politics, ethics, and personal conduct even today. In classrooms, the Socratic method, rooted in questioning, dialogue, and critical thinking, remains a cornerstone of learning. In leadership and civic life, his emphasis on integrity and moral courage inspires individuals to challenge unjust norms and make principled decisions. Across disciplines, Socratic inquiry encourages the pursuit of truth over expedience, reflection over reaction, and virtue over convenience. Modern society, with its complex ethical dilemmas, rapid technological change, and competing perspectives, benefits from this timeless model, a figure whose unwavering dedication to reason and morality illuminates paths toward thoughtful action and responsible citizenship. Socrates' trial and death are more than historical events. They embody enduring lessons about the human condition, the costs of ethical integrity, and the power of ideas to transcend time. By confronting injustice with reasoned dialogue, by valuing the examined life over personal safety, and by leaving a legacy of inquiry and reflection, Socrates challenges each generation to live with courage, wisdom, and virtue. His life and death remain intertwined, inseparable from the philosophy he championed, offering a model for navigating the moral complexities of existence. Even centuries later, his voice seems to echo through the corridors of history, urging humanity to question boldly, reflect deeply, and act ethically. Socrates' story reminds us that the pursuit of truth and the courage to live according to principle are not merely philosophical ideals, but vital guides for a meaningful and examined life. After Socrates' death, the philosophical landscape of Athens and indeed the Western world was profoundly transformed. His disciples, particularly Plato, took up the mantle of preserving and expanding upon his teachings, ensuring that the questions Socrates posed would not fade with his passing. Through Plato's dialogues, Socrates' voice continued to challenge readers to examine their own lives, to pursue truth relentlessly, and to prioritize virtue above personal gain. Each dialogue was more than a philosophical exercise. It was a living testament to the method Socrates championed: critical questioning, reflective thought, and ethical inquiry. His insistence on examining assumptions and confronting contradictions became the cornerstone of a new intellectual tradition, inspiring generations of thinkers to value reason, logic, and moral integrity. The influence of Socrates extended far beyond Athens. His ideas laid the groundwork for the work of Aristotle, whose own inquiries into logic, ethics, politics, and science built upon the foundation of Socratic thought. Socrates' commitment to rational discourse, ethical reflection, and the pursuit of knowledge informed Aristotle's systematic approach to understanding the world, shaping the evolution of Western philosophy, science, and education. Beyond individual thinkers, Socratic principles permeated institutions and intellectual traditions, embedding the practice of questioning, dialogue, and ethical reasoning into the very fabric of scholarly inquiry. Education, governance, and civic life were all subtly reshaped by the legacy of a man who had devoted his life to challenging assumptions and inspiring critical thought. The reach of Socrates' philosophy was not confined to theory. It had profound practical implications. By emphasizing self-knowledge, moral responsibility, and intellectual courage, he encouraged individuals to live lives grounded in reflection and ethical awareness. The Socratic approach suggested that true wisdom was not the accumulation of facts, but the recognition of one's limitations, the pursuit of understanding, and the cultivation of virtue. This perspective offered a radical contrast to a society often driven by power, wealth, and status, demonstrating that moral and intellectual integrity could and should guide human action. Socratic thought became a model for ethical engagement, civic responsibility, and personal growth, showing that the examined life was the most meaningful life one could lead. Across the centuries, Socrates' legacy inspired countless philosophers, educators, and reformers to question prevailing norms and to challenge injustice through reasoned argument. During the Renaissance, his emphasis on human rationality and ethical reflection resonated with scholars seeking to reconcile classical wisdom with contemporary understanding. In modern times, his methods influence the development of critical thinking, scientific inquiry, and democratic dialogue, reinforcing the importance of open discussion, ethical reasoning, and personal accountability. Socrates' insistence on the examined life continues to encourage intellectual curiosity, ethical reflection, and the courage to speak truth to power, demonstrating that philosophy is not merely an abstract pursuit, but a practical guide to living meaningfully. Even beyond the realm of philosophy, Socrates' example serves as a beacon of moral and intellectual courage. Leaders, activists, and thinkers have drawn inspiration from his life, using dialogue, reason, and ethical conviction to challenge injustice and foster understanding. His approach underscores the enduring power of ideas to shape societies and transform lives, reminding humanity that principled action, guided by reason and reflection, can leave a legacy far greater than any material achievement. Socrates' death, rather than silencing his voice, amplified it, illustrating that true influence arises not from coercion or authority, but from the force of ideas and the commitment to ethical integrity. Through the preservation of his teachings, the proliferation of his methods, and the embodiment of his principles in countless thinkers and movements, Socrates' impact has transcended time and place. His philosophy challenges each individual to confront assumptions, cultivate wisdom, and act with virtue, demonstrating that the power of human thought and moral courage can endure beyond even the harshest trials. Socrates' life and legacy remain a compelling reminder that the pursuit of truth, ethical reflection, and intellectual courage are timeless endeavors, shaping both personal character and the broader course of human history. In a world often preoccupied with superficial measures of success, Socrates' enduring message continues to inspire reflection, dialogue, and the commitment to live an examined and meaningful life. After Socrates' death, the ripples of his ideas spread far beyond the walls of Athens, influencing not only philosophers, but also the structure of Western thought itself. His most famous student, Plato, carried forward the Socratic method, embedding his teacher's commitment to dialogue, questioning, and ethical inquiry into the foundation of his own philosophical system. Plato's writings preserved Socrates' voice for posterity, ensuring that future generations could engage with his questions about virtue, justice, knowledge, and the good life. Through these dialogues, Socrates became more than a man. He became a symbol of intellectual courage and moral integrity, a figure whose life demonstrated the power of ideas to shape human thought and society. The influence of Socratic thought expanded through Aristotle, Plato's own student, whose systematic explorations of logic, science, and ethics built upon the foundations Socrates had laid. Socrates' insistence on questioning assumptions and seeking rational clarity informed Aristotle's methodical approach to understanding the natural world, human behavior, and governance. This lineage of thought, Socrates to Plato to Aristotle, established a philosophical tradition that emphasized reason, ethical reflection, and empirical inquiry as central to both personal development and societal progress. Beyond individual philosophers, Socrates' teachings affected the evolution of education, civic life, and ethical discourse. His methods inspired the development of schools and academies dedicated to rigorous intellectual training, fostering generations of thinkers who valued dialogue, critical thinking, and moral responsibility. In democratic societies, the Socratic approach encouraged active participation, informed debate, and the evaluation of laws and policies through reasoned discussion. By promoting the examined life, Socrates helped cultivate a culture where citizens were encouraged to question, reflect, and act with ethical awareness, influencing the development of civic institutions and the broader philosophical foundation of governance. Socrates' legacy also reached far into the Renaissance and modern era, inspiring scholars, reformers, and intellectuals to challenge entrenched dogmas and explore the relationship between reason and morality. His emphasis on questioning, humility and knowledge, and ethical responsibility became guiding principles for scientific inquiry, humanistic study, and social reform. Philosophers, writers, and educators drew on his example to encourage critical thinking, intellectual courage, and principled action in the face of societal pressures. The Socratic commitment to truth and virtue transcended historical context, demonstrating the enduring relevance of his ideas in shaping ethical, educational, in civic life. Even in contemporary society, Socratic principles inform dialogue, ethics, in education, the practice of questioning assumptions, examining moral choices, and seeking rational clarity remains central to disciplines ranging from philosophy and law to science and public policy. Socrates' insistence that the pursuit of knowledge and virtue should guide human action continues to challenge individuals and societies to prioritize reflection, integrity, and ethical responsibility over superficial success or unexamined tradition. His life exemplifies the power of intellectual courage, showing that enduring influence comes not from authority or force, but from the commitment to truth, reason, and moral reflection. Ultimately, Socrates' story is not confined to history books. It is a living lesson in the value of questioning, the pursuit of wisdom, and the cultivation of virtue. By challenging assumptions, engaging in dialogue, and living with moral courage, he set a standard for generations to follow. His teachings remind us that the examined life is the path to genuine understanding and meaningful existence, and that the influence of ideas, when pursued with integrity and reflection, can shape not only individual lives, but the course of human civilization itself. Through his life, death, and enduring legacy, Socrates continues to inspire reflection, dialogue, and the pursuit of wisdom, leaving a mark on history that is as profound as it is timeless. Long after Socrates' death, his influence continued to grow, spreading across generations, cultures, and disciplines in ways that he could hardly have imagined. Philosophers, educators, political thinkers, and leaders drew inspiration from his insistence on the pursuit of truth, ethical reflection, and the examined life. His method of inquiry, asking probing questions, challenging assumptions, and engaging in dialogue, became foundational not only for philosophy, but for education, law, politics, and even science. By encouraging individuals to think critically rather than accept ideas at face value, Socrates created a legacy in which intellectual curiosity, moral responsibility, and rational discourse are valued above blind adherence to authority. In education, the Socratic method became a transformative pedagogical tool. Classrooms modeled after Socrates' principles emphasized dialogue over rote memorization, fostering environments where students actively questioned ideas, defended their reasoning, and learned from their peers. This approach nurtured independent thought, analytical skills, and ethical awareness, preparing generations to confront complex problems with insight and responsibility. Teachers and scholars across the world adopted these techniques, demonstrating the enduring relevance of Socratic dialogue in cultivating minds capable of both critical inquiry and compassionate understanding. Socrates' influence extended deeply into political thought and governance. His emphasis on virtue, justice, and ethical reasoning shaped discussions about civic responsibility and leadership. Leaders who embraced his teachings recognized the importance of informed, reflective decision-making, prioritizing morality and integrity alongside power and influence. Socratic thinking encouraged societies to foster open dialogue, critical debate, and reasoned deliberation, laying intellectual foundations for democratic principles that continue to guide civic life today. By demonstrating that ethical reflection is inseparable from public action, Socrates inspired a model of leadership grounded in wisdom, accountability, and the pursuit of the common good. In literature, art, and cultural expression, Socratic ideas echoed through centuries, inspiring creators to explore themes of knowledge, morality, and human existence. Writers, dramatists, and artists drew upon Socratic questioning to examine the complexities of human behavior, the tension between virtue and vice, and the pursuit of truth. These explorations enriched culture and thought, demonstrating the far reaching impact of Socrates' commitment to inquiry and reflection. His principles provided a framework for understanding the human condition, encouraging reflection on ethical dilemmas, personal choices, and societal norms. Socratic thought also profoundly influenced law, science, and intellectual inquiry. In legal systems, methods of cross-examination, critical questioning, and logical argumentation mirror Socratic dialogue, ensuring that decisions are made with clarity and reason. Scientific inquiry, too, reflects his principles. Hypotheses are tested, assumptions questioned, and knowledge pursued systematically and ethically. On an individual level, Socratic philosophy challenges people to live examined lives, reflecting on their values, actions, and responsibilities. By advocating for self-awareness and ethical reflection, Socrates encouraged individuals to seek not only knowledge, but also moral integrity, personal growth, and meaningful engagement with society. Even in contemporary times, the legacy of Socrates remains profoundly relevant. His insistence on questioning, reflection, and virtue continues to shape education, civic discourse, leadership, and cultural understanding. Philosophers, educators, scientists, and ordinary individuals alike draw inspiration from his life, seeing in his example the power of ideas to influence thought, behavior, and society. The enduring appeal of Socratic principles demonstrates that the pursuit of wisdom, ethical living, and critical inquiry transcends historical context, offering timeless guidance for anyone seeking to live a reflective and purposeful life. Ultimately, the story of Socrates is not just a historical narrative, but a living testament to the power of the examined life. His commitment to questioning assumptions, seeking truth, and cultivating virtue continues to inspire, challenge, and guide humanity across time and place. Socrates showed that intellectual courage and moral reflection are not limited to philosophers or scholars. They are attainable and necessary for all who wish to engage deeply with the world and live meaningfully. His life and legacy remind us that the pursuit of wisdom, ethical responsibility, and critical thought is the foundation of a life well lived, and that the impact of such a pursuit can resonate across centuries, shaping societies, ideas, and human understanding long after one individual has passed. Long after Socrates' life ended, his influence continued to ripple through time, reaching far beyond the streets of ancient Athens. Philosophers, educators, political leaders, and ordinary individuals alike found inspiration in his relentless pursuit of truth, his dedication to ethical reflection, and his belief in the power of dialogue. His method of questioning, challenging assumptions, examining beliefs, and seeking understanding became a cornerstone of education, philosophy, and rational discourse. Socrates showed that true wisdom is not in knowing all the answers, but in the courage to ask questions, explore ideas, and live an examined life. Across centuries, The Socratic method transformed classrooms, legal systems, and civic life. Teachers adopted his style of inquiry to encourage students to think critically, reason logically, and engage in meaningful discussions. In courts and political arenas, the principles of questioning, argumentation, and ethical reflection mirrored Socratic practices, emphasizing accountability and integrity. Even in literature, art, and scientific inquiry, the echoes of Socrates' thought could be felt, driving creators, thinkers, and researchers to examine the human condition, test assumptions, and seek deeper truths. Today, Socrates' legacy endures not only in philosophy books or classrooms, but in the way we approach life, morality, and society. His insistence on reflection, ethical responsibility, and intellectual courage challenges each of us to question our own beliefs, consider the impact of our actions, and strive toward wisdom and virtue. In a world filled with information, opinion, and complexity, the spirit of Socrates reminds us that thoughtful questioning and the pursuit of truth remain timeless and essential. As we conclude this journey through the life and legacy of Socrates, remember that his story is not merely history, it is an invitation to live more thoughtfully, to question boldly, and to seek wisdom in our own lives. To continue exploring stories like this and uncovering the lessons of the past, make sure to subscribe to History Release and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of history's greatest thinkers and moments.